Foot fetishists rejoice, because it is time for this week's SmackDown review, featuring a heavy dose of Matt Riddle's feet and a lot of impromptu matches, because we only actually had one booked apparently. Before we get started, if you wouldn't mind just clicking like for me, we'll jump straight in. SmackDown opened with the promised interview between Matt Riddle and Michael Cole. Now, my expectation was that Michael Cole was going to be a lot more negative, particularly as regards having no shoes and the constant broing. But it turns out Michael Cole is such a bro that he outbroed the original bro when it came time to bro down. That took me 4 takes. I hope you're happy. I think it's worth pointing out that Mustafa Ali is still in the SmackDown opening video despite having quietly moved over to Raw. In addition, the Extreme Rules logo, which they showed several times over the course of this night, has had a scream added to it. Do I look like a man who's happy with this to you? I watch SmackDown at 1 o'clock in the morning over here in the UK, and I'm not particularly happy at constantly hearing screams. Also, Big E, in that particular instance, probably should be earning my ire. The interview was not the greatest promo work I've ever seen from either man, but we did get a nice long explanation of what happened to Matt Riddle's feet to make him not wear shoes. I'll have to do a bit further research because at the moment it sounds a lot like the storyline of an Adam Sandler film. A lot like it. This interview would be interrupted by everybody's favourite Baron Corbin. This is everyone's favourite, Baron Corbin, not everybody's favourite Baron Corbin of all the other possible Baron Corbins that could be your favourite. Corbin was a lot more negative to Matt Riddle, particularly playing down his chances since arriving in SmackDown, and said that even if Matt Riddle did want to fight and was ready to fight Baron Corbin, he would have to face someone else first. Now, there are, of course, stories out there that Baron Corbin refused to initially work with Matt Riddle unless Matt Riddle faced at least 5 enhancement talents. I can't say as that's true or has been confirmed in any way because the first opponent was John Morrison, and I would not call John Morrison an enhancement talent, particularly if you've seen this match, because what I will say is this comes very close to being match of the week after Sasha Banks versus Io Shirai, because both men innovated, really changed things up. John Morrison really played up to his opponent and showed things that he hasn't showed yet, at least since coming back. This was unquestionably Morrison's best match since his return, and one of the best Matt Riddle matches I've seen, even though I've only seen limited of his work in NXT. This, after facing off and beating AJ Styles 2 weeks ago, was an extremely good debut for Matt Riddle, who did pick up the win over John Morrison via a roll-up rather than anything particularly definitive. I imagine we're going to see this particular feud continue leading into Baron Corbin, who once again has found some new friends to hang around with. Funny old world. It's amazing how popular Baron Corbin is backstage, and I mean this in kayfabe, especially considering how popular he is backstage not in kayfabe and how unpopular he is once you get out to the general population. As Matt Riddle makes to leave the ringside area, he is attacked by AJ Styles. AJ Styles is attacked by Drew Gulak, and Matt Riddle apparently just lets it go, because we then move after a commercial break into the AJ Styles versus Drew Gulak match. Another extremely good match for the Intercontinental title. Daniel Bryan would join the conversation via Zoom. To my knowledge, it's not via Zoom, but it was pre-recorded segments in his hotel room as he prepares to go home after a 2-week self-isolation period. He spent a lot of time self-isolating in that hotel room, unfortunately, has Daniel Bryan. That said, he added some very good commentary to this match, particularly in analysis that you would normally only get from someone like Samoa Joe. The match is another very high quality one, and this is one that was actually supposed to happen and was supposed to be on the card. It's been well earned by Drew Gulak, who picked up a win over AJ Styles a couple of weeks ago, and at this point he returns the favour by taking the pin from AJ Styles. Good luck for Drew Gulak. I do worry though, when you consider that not many people were on this card who weren't established big name stars, I do have a concern that Drew Gulak is going to fade into the background a little bit more. They announced that we would have another champion versus champion match on Raw, this time not featuring Charlotte Flair, instead featuring Asuka versus Bayley. That's going to be a good match. They are spoiling us recently with the women's division, I've got to say. This would be followed by Sasha Banks and Bayley celebrating themselves, and after the great work they've been doing for the last few weeks, Who can actually blame them? This celebration, really each woman putting over the other woman, would be interrupted by Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross, who would also put each other over in ways that are less accurate, but still quite fun. I would love to be ruled over by Queen Nikki Cross, I've got to say. That seems like it would be an experience and a half. Very similarly to a few weeks ago, where Bayley booked Sasha Banks into a match with Alexa Bliss, this week Sasha Banks booked Bayley into a match with Alexa Bliss. Once again, high quality match. Bayley would employ some troublesome tactics, as you might expect, Sasha Banks getting involved a little bit to keep things interesting, and Nikki Cross steering her away. Sasha Banks in addition would be wearing the SmackDown Women's Championship during this match. It looks very good on her. Sign of things to come? These were the only women to feature on SmackDown this week, so no mention of Lacey Evans, Carmella, Tamina, Dana Brooke, Naomi, and of course Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville, who have mysteriously vanished for the last 2 weeks. The match ends when Nikki Cross eventually loses her temper, attacks Bayley, and that results in a DQ win for the champion. Our Universal Championship segment this week features a closer look at the Swamp and the Swamp fight that is expected. I've been told it will be similar to the Firefly Funhouse, but will actually lean in a lot to what has happened with the Ultimate Deletion of a few years ago, and that is where more action-orientated elements will come in. There have been some stunts planned. I think it's also worth pointing out that Bray Wyatt is still not at SmackDown. He is still filming from a remote location, I believe it is his home. He will be back shortly. He is expected to take a couple of weeks to quarantine, as it were, because there is always an isolation period before you come back to work to ensure that you do not have any COVID symptoms. He has of course taken time off to see his new child. I can't blame the man. Another match that wasn't announced but delivered strongly was Kofi Kingston versus Shinsuke Nakamura, and yes, it was as good as it sounds. Particularly early on when the referee ejected Big E and Cesaro from the match, ensuring no interference. This then became a lot more New Japan in style. I feel that Nakamura was really allowed to work as he enjoys working, and Kofi Kingston was able to show more than he's usually able to. This was an extremely good match. Nakamura would eventually get the win clean as you like, with a Kinshasa or at least just a blatant knee to the head. Kofi Kingston of course was quite recently the WWE champion, so this is still a good look for Nakamura. Kofi of course managed to really show what he could do as well, so I really enjoyed this match. After the match, Cesaro would return to ringside before Big E. He would pull a table out from underneath the ring, but he would be prevented from using it. Next week they have announced that this will be the SmackDown Tag Team Championship match. That means it is not going to be on the card at Extreme Rules. I'd imagine the Extreme Rules card is simply too full at the moment. I like that they are making these choices. I of course mentioned in my news video yesterday that the Forgotten Sons are being planned for a re-debut, but are unlikely to be working with the New Day for a while yet. They also announced that next week's SmackDown will feature a full rerun of the first match between Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman at Money in the Bank, which of course did feature Bray Wyatt rather than The Fiend. They are clearly struggling to fill time a little bit here, but I did mention in a previous news video that we were going to see more matches of this like to fill some time, and SmackDown has been hit a lot harder than Raw when it comes to the actual COVID-19 situation. The main event segment is probably my least favourite storyline in wrestling right now, that being Sheamus against Jeff Hardy. And this was a toast to Jeff Hardy, where there was a lot of alcohol in the ring. Alcohol, I doubt they put actual alcohol in there. If so, I have serious questions to ask about the morality of this company. And Sheamus, who was off-site. Sheamus has been off-site last week as well, which is why this initial storyline was sort of shelved for another week. He is of course off-site at the moment, so he filmed everything in what looks like they set up as a studio for this particular use. He did manage to sneak in a few things that made me like the guy, particularly the mention of You'll Never Walk Alone. He is a Liverpool Football Club fan, and they last week did become the champions of the British Premier League for the first time in 30 years. Yes, that is me slipping that in because I'm also a fan and I'm celebrating. That said, this was a bad segment. You were teasing someone who has clear addiction problems and you were doing it live on TV. And Jeff's response was to attack an innocent barman. I don't think anyone came out of this looking good. SmackDown overall this week featured great quality wrestling. However, most of it was apparently booked on the fly, so I have question marks about that. I also have serious question marks about the main event segment. That said, the women's division match was very well put together. The men's division did fantastically. The tag division did fantastically. The Intercontinental title picture did fantastically. Everything, all of the notes that needed to be hit were hit well, apart from that main event segment, which does bring it down for me. I also quite like that we got a lot more explanation as to what the swamp fight might look like. I don't want to know everything, but I do want to know roughly what we can expect. And that's made me a lot more excited for this match at Extreme Rules, where the card is looking particularly good. My Twitter poll for this week's SmackDown gave it a 44% good rating, in second place a 28% great rating. A lot of people unfortunately not happy with the main event segment, which sort of ruined what has been a very good SmackDown, and opinions were very high at the time. Quality of wrestling as usual was high, but this week in particular was very high, and they weren't short segments. That is a problem that has been happening recently, where there's been a lot of short segments. Instead, they focused just on the key parts of each division and gave them a long time to really show what they could do. I am worried about the lack of lower card talent on the show though, would like to see some more, but it depends who is available at the moment, of course. Please let me know what you thought of this week's SmackDown down in the comments. Click like on this video if you enjoyed it. I have been Tom Collihew, and I'd just like to say thank you for joining me.